Hello, 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 and welcome to the ratio and proportions unit for math. I am going to go ahead and get started. The first thing that you will see is some vocabulary words, and what I will do is pull the words up and go through them, and then write them. You can write them down. Boom, there you go. You can write the words down so that you will have them for reference. I will tell you what they mean. We are going to do a couple of examples, and then I will also give you add the um, accompanying work in your classroom. Okay. All right. So, as I stated, this unit is ratio and proportion. So, your first vocabulary word is ratio. So a ratio says how much of one thing there is compared to another thing. What is important to remember about a ratio is the word compared. Compared is the big thing to remember, because when we are working with ratios, that's basically what we are doing. We are comparing one thing to another. We either compare, one thing we can do is a lot of times when it's a school setting, we compare how many girls we have to how many boys. We may compare how many apples to how many oranges. Um, if you have like something like a bag of marbles, you may compare the colors, or a bag of Skittles, you may compare the colors. So you have 8 red Skittles compared to 6 green Skittles compared to 4 yellow Skittles compared to 5 orange Skittles, or something like that. But ultimately, it's just a way of comparing. Um, so you would hear like 4 to 5 at the rate of, so ratio comes from the word rate. So at the rate of 4 to 5, or at the rate of 6 to 7, basically we're just comparing two different things. All right. So that is ratio. Our next word is proportion. Proportion says that two ratios or fractions are equal. And as you see here, the word equal is underlined, because in this case, the key word to remember here is that equal. We want to remember equal. When we're asking if something is proportioned, proportional, or proportionate, we are simply asking, is it equal? Are the two equal? Um, and we will see some examples, and it will make a little bit more sense in a little bit. Okay. But basically what it comes down to, when you see the word proportion, if you have a problem, or a question that gives you two ratios or fractions, and they ask you, are they proportionate, or are these two proportioned, or are they proportional? It's all the same word, all the same meaning. They're simply asking you, is it equal? Okay. All right. Our next word is unit rate. Unit rate, actually, our next two words, we have unit rate and we also have unit price. Okay. I will give you both and then give you an explanation. Unit rate is how much of something per 1 unit of something. That sounds like a whole lot, right? It's really not. And then we have unit price, which is the price per item for each size of the package. Here's the thing, unit rate and unit price are basically the same thing. The only difference is obviously unit price deals with money. At the end of the day, we are trying to find out the cost of something per unit. Meaning, if I have a package of socks, if I have a package of socks and it's 10 pair of socks that comes in the pack, the cost of the pack is $10. If I want to know, well, I don't want to buy the whole pack of 10, I just want to buy one pair of socks, then I would have to calculate the cost of just that one pair. That is what we call a unit rate. or a unit price, how much it is for just one of them, for the most part. Okay. And again, this will all make more sense once we get into the actual lesson. Okay. So, again, our vocabulary words are ratio, which says how much of one thing there is compared to another. And the key word to remember from ratio is compared. Next, we have proportion, which is proportion says that two ratios or fractions are equal. And so the key word for proportion is equal. And then we have unit rate and unit price. And the key words for unit rate and unit price is really per item or per one unit, per item or per one unit. All right. So that's your vocabulary. So when we talk about ratios, that was our first vocabulary word. One thing that I want you to note is when we write out ratios, we have three different ways that we can, what we call represent ratios, or basically write it out or type it out or whatever you're doing. The three ways that we can display our ratios is one is a fraction. So in this case, our ratio is four to five. So when we write it out as a fraction, you see four out of 4/5 or 4/5. Or you can write it using a colon. You see the colon is the two dots, so that's 4 to 5. Or you write it using word. We say words, but it's only one word, to. So 4 to 5. So there are three ways that we can represent ratios, and that is by a fraction, that is by a colon, that is by words, or 4 to 5. Um, the word to, so as in 4 to 5. All right. When we talk about ratios, again, it is a matter of comparing some things to each other. But before we get that far, I want you to take a moment and grab a piece of paper if you don't already have it, and just practice writing these ratios in the three different forms that they can be written. So here it gives you the fraction format. So now you have to write it in the colon format and in the word format. Okay. So I'll try to give you. Uh-oh. See if it'll let me give you an example. And it won't. I was gonna try to write on it, but it's not allowing me to. Okay. So, um, so here you should have had three, the colon and seven, and then the words three, the number three, the word two, and the number seven, so on and so forth. Okay. All right. So once you have completed this slide, we are going to move on to a little bit more practice of writing out comparing things in the format in the three different formats. Okay, so I told you that when we talk about ratios, we are comparing something to something else. So here we have different shapes, and you are comparing the different shapes in each example. So for number one, we see two shapes. We see a triangle and we see a square or a rectangle, whatever you want to call it. What we would do is count the triangles. So there's 5 triangles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then there's 3 rectangles. So our ratio in this instance will be 5 to 3. 5 to 3. So then we would write, I don't know why it's not allowing me to write. Oh, it's not allowing me to write. That's rude. Okay. So then it would be 5. We would just write in fraction format 5 over 3, colon format 5 colon 3, and then word 5 2 3. So that is what this slide is. This is to give you practice on one, comparing two circles or triangles. Is the next one. It's number 2. So you would count your triangles or count your circles and then count your triangles. So the number of circles is your first number, the number of triangles is your second number, and you would write it using the fraction, colon, and word format. So that's what you do for all 10 of these. So I'll give you a couple of minutes. All right. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing this. All right. So that was ratios. That was us talking about ratios. So just as a quick run through and a quick review, when it comes to ratios, we are simply comparing something to another something or some things. We are comparing some things to each other. Um, Things to remember when it comes to ratios is that it can be displayed, written, or represented. You may see any of those words in 3 different ways. Those 3 ways are fraction, colon, and words. Fraction, colon, words. So whatever you're comparing, you will count up the first thing you're comparing, whether you're comparing cats to dogs, girls to boys, oranges to apples, triangles to circles, circles to squares, whatever the case may be. You count up one object, and then the second object, and that becomes your ratio. Okay. All right. The next piece of this is when we talk about proportion. When we talk about proportion, proportion is specifically using um, ratios, your ratio, and you're trying to figure out if they are equal. Now, let's see if I will be able to do this. All right. So typically when we see fractions, we will ask ourselves, can they be reduced to lowest terms? Oh, I don't think you can see me. All right. We will ask ourselves, sorry about that. We ask ourselves, can our fractions be reduced to lowest terms? And if they can be reduced to lowest terms, then that's what we do. We will reduce them to the lowest term. What reducing it to lowest terms tells us is that now the two fractions are equivalent. I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but we will try it. Okay, why does it look like that? Okay. There we go. All right. So when we reduce 2/4, remember when we reduce our fractions, what we want to do is look at both numbers, the numerator and the denominator. And we ask ourselves, what is the biggest number, or does the numerator and the denominator have a number in common that they can both be divided by? If they do, we want to see what is the greatest number or the biggest number that they have in common that they can both be divided by. In this case of 2/4, both of these can be divided by 2. So when we reduce this fraction to lowest terms, we get 1/2. What we are saying is 2/4 is equal to 1/2, or they're the same thing in essence. See if I can put it in context a little bit. So if I draw a circle and I make 4 um, sections of the circle, I started off with 2/4. So I want to shade in 2 of the 4 areas. If I do that, even though I shaded in 2/4 of the area, I can also see that I also shaded in 1/2 of the area, thus letting me know that 2/4 and 1/2 is the same thing, or they are equal. 2/4 is equal to 1/2. Well, Miss Ramey, I won't always have time to draw circles. So how will I know if they are equal? Well, that's good. Another thing you can do, well, in this case, it's another, and we'll get to I'll say it this way, we'll get to the other thing that you can do. But the big thing that I want you to take away is when you reduce a fraction to its lowest term, what you are also saying is that the two fractions are equal, or they are proportional, proportionate, proportioned, same thing. So let's do this one, 8/24. Two numbers that 8 and 24 can both be divided by is 8. A number that both 8 and 24 can be divided by is 8. So when I divide 8 by 8, I get 1. And when I divide 24 by 8, I get 3. So what I'm saying is 8/24 is equal to 1/3. So if I was to see this as a problem, 8/24 and 1/3, they're going to ask me, hey, are these two fractions proportional? And I have to try to figure it out. So one thing I can note is that, hey, 1/3 is what you get when you reduce 8/24. But if I'm not on my game that day, or if I just don't remember how that works, if I'm not that good at reducing fractions, the other thing that I can do to figure out if these fractions are proportionate is what we call cross multiply. So I can multiply 8 times 3. Cross multiplies when you multiply the numerator times the denominator on the opposite in the opposite fraction, and then you do the other. You do the numerator times the denominator of this fraction. So 8 times 3 is 24, and 1 times 24 is 24. Since those two numbers are equal, then it is safe to say that since 24 equals 24, it is safe to note that 8/24 and 1/3 is proportional or equal. Okay, 5/25. Yep, both can be divided by 5, so that gives you 1/5. So 125 or 1/25, sorry, and 1/5 are proportionate. They're equal to each other. And in this case, 4/5, this was just to see if your brain power is working. You can't reduce this anymore, so there isn't anything to put there. However, there are equivalent fractions for this, but we'll run into that a little bit later. So when it comes to something being proportioned, it's just a matter of asking, are they equal? How do we find out if they're equal? If it is a fraction that can be reduced, then you simply reduce it to its lowest terms, and then you figure it out. Oh, yes. But typically, they're going to present the problem to you with both fractions. And a quick way for you to do it is to just simply cross multiply. When you cross multiply, if the two numbers are equivalent, then that makes it proportional. Okay. I hope that makes sense. All right. I am going to stop sharing. So, what your assignment is going to be is in your classroom. I was gonna say class website. No, in your classroom, you will have vocabulary words. So you want to make sure that you copy down your vocabulary words. Make sure you highlight the words that are important. Those words that I said, make sure you point out. And then there is a practice worksheet on ratio. Basically, you're just going to write. It starts off with. Let me see if I'm able to share it. Um, Okay, so it starts off here, ratio and proportion intro. What we want you to do is draw a picture to represent each fraction. And that is easy. You could draw circles, you can draw rectangles. We just want you to draw something that represents 1/3 and 4/5. You move into the next section, we want you to simplify each fraction if it can be simplified. Okay. All right. And then here I told you that it can be ratios can be represented in three ways. It can be represented as a fraction, a colon, and then words. So this is that table that I pulled up for you, and this is where you would fill it in. So you want to write it as a fraction, as a colon, and then as words. Oh, sorry about that. All right. And then here is where you begin to compare your pictures. So for number one, that was also in your slide, in your second slide, if I'm not mistaken, that I pulled up, but here it is on paper. So you're just going to count how many triangles you have, how many squares you have, and write it out accordingly in three different ways. Right here, write the following statement as ratios in fraction form. So in math class, there are 9 males and 11 females. So ratio of males to females. So you got 9 males, you have 11 females. And you're going to write it as a fraction. And then it says ratio of females to males. 11 females, 9 males. Ratio of males to the total number of students. So if I have 9 males and 11 females and I put them all together, how many students is that? Okay, and then how many out of that total number of students, how many male students do I have? That's how you do that. And then, okay, in a geometry class, the ratio of boys to girls is 2 to 3. If there are 20 students in this class, how many girls are there? So basically, for every 2 boys, there's 3 girls. So we know that that's 5 students right there. We got to get to 20 and figure out how many girls are in the class. Now, this one might be a little bit difficult, but I want to challenge your mind and see if you have an idea of how to figure it out. If you don't, no problem, we'll come back and work through it. And then this one is writing 5 equivalent ratios for each ratio. So this is kind of what we were just working on. You can reduce if it's able to be reduced, or you can multiply, you can draw pictures. But actually, I think I'm going to have you hold off on this part unless you want to try it. And then we can kind of come back and work through this together. Okay. And then again, we're writing ratios in simplest form. And here, this is where we figure out if the ratios are proportional or if they're equal. Well, how in the world? This has colons in it, and we just talked about it in fraction format, right? So how do you figure this out? Uh-oh. I was trying to find my writing tool, sorry. If it's gonna let me write. Oh, it is. All right. So what you can do is turn these into a fractions because remember, when we write a ratio, they can be written in three different ways. So if I write 2:3 as 2/3 as fraction format, it's the same thing. Okay. So we want to know if 2/3 and 4/6 are equal to each other. Remember, I told you we can simply cross multiply. So 2 times 6 is 12, and 3 times 4 is 12. Since those two numbers are the same, they are equal. This would be, yes, it's proportionate. All right. And so that's what you would do with the rest of these. Just turn them into fractions. Cross multiply. If the numbers are equal, it's a yes. If they are not, it is a no. Okay. And you don't have to worry about the exit ticket. We'll come back to that. All right. So all of this will be in your classroom. If you have any questions, if it's something you get confused on, just jot it down, and I will check in with you. You can let me know what you got going on. Okay. All right.